I'm also hoping to find some answers to my doubts. My question is, without defaulting to a deceiver type, such as the devil, or a mere coincidence itself, how would you answer those who claim that the theistic significance of Jesus Christ is a mere personification of the pagan admirance of the Son as the Savior of humanity, being as the story of Jesus Christ mirrors that of many pre-Christian deities such as Egypt's Horus, which are centered around the sun's yearly patterns of movement in the earth's sky?
S-U-N is a different spelling than S-O-N. You're talking about apples and oranges, two different things. So simply because Egyptian polytheism refers to one of their multiplicity of gods in the form of S-U-N, sun, I don't see any logical connection between that and Christianity with S-O-N. It's a totally different category.
In the temple walls in Luxor, there is a hieroglyphic image which mirrors exactly the birth story of Jesus Christ, which predates any Christian writings. How would you explain that?
Same way I would explain other stories that are written about, say, the flood, universal flood, before the actual date of the Old Testament. The Torah was written about 1400 BC. Simply because Moses didn't write about those stories until 1400 BC does not mean that those stories did not exist and they weren't being circulated by oral tradition. In fact, they were being communicated by oral tradition. And so the creation story of Adam and Eve, the story of the flood with Noah, those stories were circulated with oral tradition before Moses ever wrote them down in the Torah in 1400 BC. So those stories were known in the general culture. Other cultures can pick up those things and use them for their own type of ideas or embed them in written literature. Simply because it was written prior to when Christians wrote it down does not mean that that content originated with those other religious systems in the least bit. I was going to comment on Jamal's, something you said earlier there, but I forgot what it was.
Well, you've got a follow-up on your question, or?
Yeah, you just mentioned how other cultures can take previous stories and use them for their own purposes. How do you show that Christianity hasn't done that same exact thing?
By looking at historical references that the scriptures make. For example, there's one theologian, he actually lives not too far from here, but as a non-Christian and as a skeptic, he began reading the Old Testament. And when he read Genesis chapter 1, the creation events, as a non-Christian and as a skeptic, he calculated the probability that Moses would correctly guess the proper sequence of creation events. He calculated that he had a 1 in 11 million chance. Now, he wasn't a Christian, and he kind of wanted to prove Christianity and the Bible faulty. So he decided that he would go on a 1-month project, begin to read the Old Testament, find any reference to historical events or scientific type phenomena, and then he would take that thing and test it by history and science to see whether or not it was really valid. It didn't take him a month, it actually took him 12 months to go through, because there were so many comments in the scriptures about historical events and scientific type of statements that it took him a whole year to investigate that. After a year of investigating it, he found that the Bible was in fact reliable historically and scientifically, and he was so convinced of its consistency that he committed his life to Jesus Christ. And so we can check it based upon statements that it makes, tons of statements. Read the book, The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. He talks tons about it.
Thank you very much. While you're there, it was offered to me that I could ask a quick question, and I want to go back to the first question that was asked. The first verbal question was about whether God needs to sleep. But in Genesis, it says God rested. Does God work at different paces? Did God need rest because God was tired?
No, he did not. Actually, the idea in Genesis chapter 1, and it's a great point. It's awesome. God ceased with his supernatural creative activity. So for 6 days, God was involved in special type of creation. Forming planets, creating stars, starting fusion reactions, creating mammals, creating marine life, creating birds. So he did all this stuff, creation, over a period of time. But after he finished on the 6th day, God rested from special creation. And that's true yet today. God is still resting.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a couple of wrap-up comments. Hang on one second. Well, join me in thanking our speakers today, Dr. Badawi and Mr. Rittenhouse, for a wonderful dialogue. I have two announcements I've been asked to make. First, to make sure that you know to turn in the yellow surveys at the table over here where the folks are wearing their t-shirts, the black t-shirts with this logo and this design. Secondly, again, if you'd like some more dialogue tonight, you can go to the music recital hall at 7 o'clock. Mr. Rittenhouse will be there, as will a convert to Islam, Megan Wyatt. So there will be more chances to engage in this dialogue and ask questions. Now, I was asked to just give a closing remark here, and it seemed to me that rather than finding someone else to quote, it seemed to me that, or giving you my own creation, it seemed to me that Jesus should have the last word today. And I don't mean at all to suggest a position here or a favoritism about which side, because I think the whole point about having these kinds of debates in the academic forum is to have intellectual freedom and open-mindedness. It's up to you to decide what you think about these things. We just hope that this help inspire you to do more research on your own and more thinking. And so with that, I'm going to say that Jesus himself there's a story about him being in a debate where someone was challenging him, tried to ask him a tricky question to see whether they could throw him off balance. It was a little less collegial than the dialogue today. And this comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12. Jesus was there when the scribes came near him and said, when they were disputing with one another, the scribes and so forth, and so these scribes decided that they'd try to ask Jesus this question. And so one of them said, "Which commandment is the first of all?" And Jesus answered, "The first is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." Well, whether you think Jesus was God or Jesus was a prophet, I think a lot of people agree that he said these things, and there's certainly no harm in taking that forward. So with that, let me just say I look forward to seeing you all here again for another dialogue sometime.